live, you are live.
Good morning everybody. Slightly different circumstances you find us in here today. You are on a live safari, sort of. It's raining here in marvelous Africa, from the coast of Mozambique all the way to the west of the Drakensberg. There is a thick bank of cloud that is depositing Africa's richest blessing down on a parched land. My name is James Henry. To my right is Stefan. Good
morning.
And we are here to sort of just have a brief chat about life in the wild. And please send through any questions you might have. Hashtag Safari Live, questions at WildEarth.tv. We're going to talk about a few things that we saw yesterday. And the reason that we are not out on drive, as we would normally be, or on walk in Steph's case, is that it is raining. Very pleasantly raining. It has been raining since about 2 o'clock yesterday evening. And we think this is a decent shower. We've probably had about, 20 millimeters?
I would say. Easy.
So 20 millimeters was just under an inch, which for here is pretty good, and I think this is going to result in a very nice flush of green grass. I have not in fact grown during the night. I'm standing on a log. That's why I look slightly taller than Steph. He is in fact much taller than me in real life. Now, we had a lovely question from Paddy that we both answer. He wanted to know, before we sort of get you into some of the clips that we've got, if we could bring one animal back from extinction, what animal would that be? What would you...
I mean, I must say my first thoughts always go to Jurassic Park and all these weird movies that you see on TV. And I'd probably say I'd love to see a Tyrannosaurus Rex or a Brontosaurus or one of those whale things with the flippers that stick out in all 4 directions. You know, I think that'd be quite nice.
Yeah. Astonishing to see something that enormous. I mean, what does the Brontosaurus weigh?
Not as much as a blue whale, funny.
Oh.
So blue whale's the heaviest thing that occurs in the universe, so far as we know.
Really?
So far, yeah. And it is a lot of tons. 60, 70, maybe even more than that.
And a blue whale?
260 tons.
260 tons. And an elephant is roughly 6 tons, so quite a lot larger than an elephant. Yeah. I think I would like to see, I was just reading yesterday about, our human expansion out of Africa. And we caused, as human beings, apart from the extinction of every other hominid species in the world, we also caused the extinction of a huge number of marsupials in Australia. All the saber-toothed cats, they reckon that we probably took care of. And, of course, the woolly mammoth. And so I was thinking somewhere along the lines of a saber-toothed tiger or perhaps a woolly mammoth would be 2 of the animals I'd quite like to see. Nice one, Paddy. So, we'll take you into our first clip. Yesterday we saw some fairly unusual behavior from some impala. Brent was on drive, and Steph's going to talk us through it. He's got some theories as for why it was happening, and it was 2 impala rutting, basically, well outside of the rutting season. Of course, the lambs are about to be born, hopefully at the end of next month. So take a look at this, and we'll discuss it when we get back.
Oh, there we go. You can hear that. Where are you guys going? It's unusual to see them fighting this strongly this time of the year. Oh, almost looks like they got locked there for a second. Oh, there we go, and we have a winner. And he's certainly pushing home his advantage. They might come back across here. Wow, look at them go.
So wasn't that kept quite interesting, James? I mean, these 2 male impala were busy going at it, but really going at it. They weren't playing. It was a proper fight. And I must say that having a look at that and realizing that the rut was actually in May and it wasn't now gets the thinking, why would impala be fighting first? They don't have pub fights, they don't fight over territory this time of the year. It's not over a resource. The grass is actually looking quite good at the moment. I can only imagine that it comes from the fact that the females are all all having a spike in the estrogen levels just before they go and have their lambs. Their lambs are needing certain things, and I think estrogen is unlocking those last little growth spurts inside of them before they drop their lambs, and the males are reacting to this. The weird thing is that you don't see it with every impala male. You only see it with a couple, but it's intense and it's quite hardcore. And what we were seeing over there was a prolonged, aggressive engagement that resulted in the one turning around and running away, with the other one following it, furiously.
And roaring?
No roaring from what I can remember, but definitely engaging, a lot of dust, disengaging, posturing, engaging again, lots of dust, and then
fully grown.
Fully grown males, exactly. So I can only imagine it's these, for lack of a better word, prime males, the fully mature males, reacting to the slight estrus increase in the females. And this time of the year, the males and the females are actually starting to reform these amalgamated groups again, these groups where males and females are all together.
Okay.
And they're starting to bunch around A, good feeding areas, and B, it's just good to have more eyes and ears around when the babies finally do come around.
So the other thing that many of you those of you who've been on safari with perhaps less than salubrious guides, I don't think you can be a salubrious guide, never mind, but less than perhaps less well-informed guides may have been told at some stage that an impala is able to prolong pregnancy, so to put off lambing until conditions are favorable. Now, this of course makes no biological sense at all, because it would imply that the impala is able to stop the fetus developing, which is pretty incredible, and certainly doesn't seem to be possible as far as I'm concerned.
You've got quite an interesting theory on, well, not theory, I mean it's an observation that's actually backed by some fact.
So we don't think that that's possible, and we think it comes from the fact that sometimes in February there will be little lambs knocking about the place, and the question is, how could that happen if the females are all mating in May? And the answer is that there's a very small and sort of it's common, it happens every year, but it's a very small proportion of females will mate during September, and they will have babies in February. And I've seen that the only time, it's the easiest time to see impala mate, because they do it during the day, as opposed to in May, which is during the night time. So we think that's what gave rise to this thought that impala are able to hold the fetus in the uterus until sort of 3 or 4 months after they're supposed to give birth. That doesn't make any biological sense. Oops, I fell off my log. Okay. A question from D about elephants and their brains, and how much does an elephant brain weigh? I don't know, D.
I actually do have that fact somewhere. I'm just trying to recall it in my dusty memory bank, so D. I do know that it's the size. It's roughly this size, which is on soccer ball, maybe as big as a soccer ball, just a little bit bigger than a soccer ball. I'm wanting to see. I've seen two people pick it up. Let's call it 10 kilograms, 10, 12 kilograms. I wouldn't say it's anything more than that. Nothing.
10 kilos of brain. That's almost as big as Steph's brain. Not quite, much bigger than mine, definitely. Then a question from Vancouver, where I believe that the weather is probably quite similar to this most of the year, so I've heard. Debbie, you want to know about rhino, and it's an interesting query. Rhino are blind, almost. Well, sort of. I'll tell you a few stories. I don't think they're quite as blind as we think they are, and I'm sure you probably agree. You want to know why their eyesight is poor, and what other senses have they got to survive, and what would be this is the interesting part of your question, what would be the evolutionary reason for having an animal that lives in the bush that doesn't have great eyesight? Because it seems to be one of the only things out there that has bad eyesight. Steph?
I'd like to split the discussion here between black rhino and white rhino, because I think there needs to be a discussion about both. And I'd also like to make the point at this particular stage that rhino, we think they look quite prehistoric because they've got this big horn on the front of their nose, and we're used to things with horns coming out of the Jurassic area or some other funny name. But rhino, from an evolutionary point of view, are actually quite new. The body structure that they have currently is actually quite a well-developed body structure. And the migration, we're talking about white rhino here, the migration of the ears to the top of their head, that wide mouth that you see on the white rhino, the horn, the big body structure, the grey color, and then the eyes, which have become not redundant, but they are situated on the side of the head and not on the front for binocular vision, are all signs that this animal is actually, it fits its environment quite well. So the grass that they eat, face in the grass, ears at the top of the grass, big horn for protection, grey color for uniformity and for heat and everything else. So I would say that it's just from where they stay. White rhino eat grass. Grass is tall, face in the grass most of the day to feed this big body. It means that you don't really need eyes when you're as big as what you are and you have everything else going for you. So.
I've done walks around. You're that much more careful and that much more aware of what's going on, and you try and be as silent as possible. And I've done a walk once. We were walking along a dam wall, and it was a big dam. Say, if you've seen Buffelshoek Dam, it was probably twice the size of Buffelshoek Dam, and there was a white rhino standing the other side of the dam, and we thought, this thing will never see us. We'll just walk across the top of the dam wall. There's obviously no danger. It's miles away from us. It can't hear us. It can't smell us. Wind was right. And we walked across the top of the dam wall, and there's absolutely no question. This thing looked up and it saw us. No question. That said, I mean, you've probably had situations where you've been in the bush tracking, and you can... I remember an incident of a rhino probably 20 meters away. I was looking and I looked up, and there was this thing just kind of grazing along. And then it sensed, it heard me, and it looked up. Now, did it see me? It didn't feel like it saw me, because I walked very silently off to the right, and its head didn't follow me at all. So whether it was, it was kind of looking around, whether it couldn't see me or whether it just didn't care that I was there, I don't know.
Similar thing, you can quite often get right up to sleeping rhino. You can quite often, if the wind is right at least, stand next to them. They'd almost walk past you while they're coming past. But a very famous field guide at the moment, a gentleman called Adrian Lowe, also reckons that white rhino are the same as us. They're a little bit more dangerous than what we give them credit for, because everyone discounts the danger of a rhino. And B, that their eyesight is also better than what we think it is. They just react better to movement, it seems, and contrast than actual seeing you in the bush.
I think also, for us as human beings, our sight is such an important part of what we recognize threats. We don't use our nose to recognize a threat. We sort of use our ears. But if we're looking for a threat, it's through our eyes completely. Whereas for a lot of animals out here, they're using their other senses. Smell specifically, and you've all watched us, or a lot of you have watched us driving around in the vehicles. We stop next to a buffalo bull, and it looks up kind of and then sits down again, and the wind shifts and comes from behind you and blows into it, and suddenly this thing lifts its head up and looks at you like that. And it's because they're assessing threats in a different way from us. So maybe rhino do see a bit better. And black rhino?
Black rhino, I think their eyesight is definitely better than white rhino, and I think, for me at least, if you take it the two parts, their habitats, even though the bush that black rhino inhabit is also quite thick and leafy generally, they definitely have a better visual sort of adaptation. They definitely see better than what white rhino do for me. But once again, thick bush, lots of leaves, lots of trees. They don't really need their eyesight as much as what would need a better eyesight. Giraffe, for instance. Lion, perhaps. But
Then, onto a different subject. Edward was asking about vultures. And Edward, you want to know the decline in vultures. Is there any noticeable ecological effect in an area like this to the sort of declining numbers of vultures? That's an interesting one. When I arrived here at Djuma, it was after it was a 4 or 5 year hiatus from a proper wildlife area like this. I've been around kind of community wildlife areas, but into the Kruger Park, it has been a hiatus of 5 years. And I have to say that I think that there are fewer vultures than there were when I started in 2000 up at Ngala. I mean, you wouldn't, if something died, anything died, there would be an immediate dissension of hundreds of birds would come flying out of the sky, plumes of them, and now it's just,
I read
notice the same thing?
I noticed an interesting article yesterday. Was it yesterday? It might have been Saturday or Sunday in the Hoedspruit Herald or whatever you call it, the local newspaper at least anyway. And they had found that the local communities here, there was an increase in the muti trade in vulture products. Now, muti is I suppose a colloquial name for bush medicine or bush cures, and quite often is very similar to how primitive medicine would be. It's attributed to certain facts of better eyesight. For instance, you'd eat the vulture, part of a vulture, and you'd be able to see better, or deal with a cold better. I don't know what it is, but definitely people are poisoning donkeys. They're poisoning carcasses next to the road, waiting for the vultures to come and then taking those products and selling it, unfortunately. And I think that is it's a steady, but it's a definite.
And I think the days of farmers poisoning carcasses are probably in the past. Tremendous number of poor people on the edges of the park, up to, I've read 9 million, I know it's probably not quite that many, but it's at least 4 million people live on the borders of the western borders of the Kruger National Park, most of them living in abject poverty, an unemployment rate of probably up to 60%. The government will tell you it's not that high, the government has no idea. 60% of the people not working. People are desperate. And unfortunately, vultures, unlike the mammals, here do not see fences and cannot be contained. So I think, is there a noticeable ecological effect in the bush yet? There probably is. I haven't seen anything particular that I could sort of name, but there must be an effect. Certainly that we had a buffalo carcass a little while back. The Birmingham boys killed a buffalo here. The hyenas came in and had a bit of a chomp at it, and then it would have been perfect for a whole lot of vultures. We saw maybe 3 or 4 white-backed vultures and maybe 2 hooded vultures. It will be having an effect.
Vultures, in my opinion at least, eat more meat per year than all the other predators and scavengers put together. I think they have a massive effect on the environment. And I think, I don't know what, the runoff of it would be more bacteria, more diseases, nutrients not spread over a very wide area, so you're getting concentrations of nutrients. So you're going to get impacts on certain communities of grass, I suppose.
I think it's effects that we wouldn't necessarily see, obviously, but after a lengthy period, I think that we probably would. All right, let's move back on to the woolly mammoths. There's an interesting sort of discussion going on. Barbara, Teresa, and Beast. I think Beast, you're in Texas. Barbara, I think you're in British Columbia, and Teresa, I'm afraid my small brain has forgotten where you are.
Or we could just offer condolences for losing the rugby on Saturday.
Well, quite, yes.
If you're the same Beast.
Yes, quite. Now, you were asking about woolly mammoths, and the crux of the discussion here is they have found or extracted DNA from a woolly mammoth found somewhere, I think in British Columbia, in Canada. And is it possible, or what do we think about the fact that scientists seem to be close to cloning a woolly mammoth? And I think they're going to, if they do it, they would use an elephant as a surrogate mother. What do we think about that? What do you think?
I know they're trying to do it with that extinct zebra, that quagga in South Africa. I know there's been attempts to get dodos back on track and to use it as a mechanism to reverse extinction of a species that's already past that threshold, where there's just not enough. I mean, what do I think about them doing it for the woolly mammoth? I suppose I'd have to say that if they're using it as a base to save future generations of animals that are on the brink of extinction, for instance some tigers or the cheetah, something that's alive today, I wouldn't have a problem with it. But to bring something back from the dead, purely because they just want to bring something back from the dead, I suppose that I have a little bit of an issue with.
I think for me it would depend very much on why it went extinct. So was it an anthropogenic effect, or was it a dinosaur that was wiped out by a giant meteor that crashed into the world? For me, I think a mammoth is probably at both ends of the scale there. I mean, a mammoth, they probably went extinct because of us, but obviously there were huge climate factors involved in that as well. I think the world warmed up a great deal, and that probably contributed substantially to the extinction of mammoths. But things like mastodons and that sort of thing, I think it's an interesting one, because so the dodo is completely our fault. The quagga is completely our fault through overhunting. I mean, and that's in the last 200 years. So if they could do that, I would say go for it. You can. But you see, the thing is, as soon as we start fiddling,
where does it stop?
Where does it stop? A, and B, what are the actual effects going to be? We as human beings are very good. I remember reading about there was a comment made, I think at the end of the 20s, when they discovered the atom. And one of the famous scientists said, we've reached the end of history, i.e. there's nothing else for us to learn. We now understand the way the universe works. From here it's basically just Phil. We'll be able to figure everything out, from sickness to medical conditions to weather patterns to everything. And we now know that we know far less than we thought we did, and every day we realize how much less we thought we knew, if that makes sense. And what's really important is that a biological system is a suite of variables that very few of us understand in its entirety. There was no weather predictor today. We still are unable to predict the weather effectively. We are totally unable to understand biological systems correctly. We don't understand the human body correctly. And there are doctors who will tell you they do, but there are so many different diseases that we're unable to cure, unable to understand. And you start putting woolly mammoths back into the wild, we don't know what they're going to do. We don't know what diseases they're going to bring with them. We don't know whether they'll be resistant to diseases, perhaps introduce diseases. We've got no idea. And people who tell you that we do have an idea, I think are very scarily walking down the wrong road. Then, totally different tack, of course. We were walking yesterday. I was, and Steph should have been walking this morning, and maybe will this afternoon. And Barbara, you want to know whether we prefer walking, or I think it was riding or driving. So, I mean, there are actually 3 or 4 different kinds of safari you can do. You can go on foot, you can go in a vehicle, you can go on a horse, and sometimes you can go on a canoe or a bicycle. What's your favourite?
I suppose it would depend, and I don't always just like walking. And walking is it's nice, you get into the bush and it feels okay, but there are certain times you just don't want to walk. When the bush is very thick, it's not comfortable to walk, you get snagged up on everything, or when it's very hot or very cold or blustery. And drives are nice when you want to go and see a different place, or you want to cover a large area. I'm not a big fan of bicycle safaris, I must be honest with you. I don't mind riding bicycles, I did for many years, but it's not my favorite form of getting around in the bush.
Risky.
It is. Although
some areas.
Evidence suggests that it isn't, but it's not for me. Canoes, once again, I've been terrified on canoes by hippo and crocodile and elephant, funnily enough, and although it's nice and it gets done, and I appreciate what people are doing for the safari industry with canoes, it's not for me. And you? What do you enjoy?
For me, I mean, I enjoy walking. Like yesterday evening, Andrew and I were walking around. It was a gentle kind of stroll through the bush. We weren't tracking anything. We were just looking and being careful and listening and just enjoying being on foot. And for me, I think it does depend on the time. I've done a horseback safari.
What did you think of that?
I think it's fun. I do think that with predators, though, it's you need to be in an area where you really can see a decent distance. I think to do it in thick bush is probably a little dangerous because there's no question that a lion on foot. If you see I would rather see a lion on foot than I would on horseback.
Yeah.
You don't know how the horse is going to react, A, and B, you don't know how the lion's going to react to the horse.
And elephants?
Elephants I saw, and elephant were fascinated. And I think, as long as if you're in a safe area, I'm pretty comfortable that you can outrun an elephant on a horse. I think the elephant would give up pretty quickly.
And being on an elephant? For an elephant-backed safari?
I'm not convinced that's... I'm not convinced that's...
I agree with you.
We're not...
I enjoy walking with elephants. There's a couple of places in Africa where you can be part of the herd and walk with semi-tame elephants. That for me was fascinating. But being on the back of an elephant, I believe in karma here, and I don't want anything to be able to return the favor one day. So riding an elephant or eating a crocodile for me are no-go zones.
I think with elephants it's interesting because they are so I think they're so emotionally in tune that you don't have to necessarily tame an elephant to be able to walk with it. It can become used to you without becoming domesticated and tame, which I think is amazing. And you see those incredible pictures, especially in Mana pools, of people sitting on the ground underneath trees and the elephants feeding. Have you ever around them? Completely wild elephants. No, I haven't, and I'm really desperate to go up there and be.
Does it only happen there? Is a question that I have. I mean, you see these pictures, just like James suggests, these enormous trees with people sitting with their backs against the trees, and these elephant bulls feeding around them, predominantly bulls. But I've always been a bit nervous to try it here in the Kruger, even though bulls do relax around you after some time. Not Mama Z, someone else. I've never seen her before in my life. She was very confused. There's a child on her back. It's just how it goes out here, Right. Okay. So that's walking safaris. And I think driving is great. If you want high action, high sort of energy stuff, obviously a wild dog hunt with Brent Leo Smith is maximum energy, sort of Red Bull extreme sport. And then you get totally down to the walking side of things. So yesterday, Andrew and I were walking along. We were walking quite quickly because it was getting dark, and we were heading towards the vehicle, and Andrew said, "Oh, stop." And there he spotted what we're going to show you now. It's a snake. It looks like an earthworm, but isn't. And I suspect the fact that it is... Sorry, I'm talking rubbish. Here's the front end here. Now, what it's got here, if you look carefully, is that it's got a kind of digging mechanism. It will try and get into the sand to get away from us. And I suspect what you'll also see is that it looks almost like it's got a head at each end, and that's probably for defense, probably to try and detract or confuse predators as to where it's looking and what it's doing. Look at that. There you go. No. Now, I am going to pick it up because I don't want to leave it on the road here. If somebody comes past here during the course of the night, they will definitely run it over. So while we're picking it up, you can have a look at it. Isn't that amazing? Look at that unbelievable little animal, little blind snake. Okay, let's put him over here. I'm not going to put him on a tree. Oh, he's actually hanging there now, very nicely. So we'll let him climb off if he wants to. Just astonishing. Look at the incredible musculature, how that skeleton must be moving. Inside this tiny little body is a backbone. There are a whole lot of ribs, thousands, well not thousands, but probably hundreds of ribs all the way along. And I can actually see his little face there. I think he is probably a little bit stressed now. So let's put him there. Now you can't keep my stick. Give it back. Alright, I'll give it to you. There you are, you can have it. Liked my stick, he did. Isn't that beautiful? Right, so that was a little snake. Now, since recently identified as Peters, we think thread snakes or distant thread snake. One of the two, an interesting snake, and one of the things that I don't know if that part of it was included, but I said that snakes sometimes sham death.
And one of the diagnostic features of the Peter's blind snake is the fact that it does appear to sham death. Now, shamming death means that it pretends to be dead in order to try and avoid predation. So something like a rinkhouse, which is a sort of a spitting cobra, will do that. And it's an interesting way to try and avoid predation. Shamming death.
I'm trying to recall what the terminology for it is in my mind, and I want to say thanatosis. Is that
what it's called?
Yeah. So there we go. Thanks, Andrew.
Thank you, Andrew.
Andrew's field guiding career coming out there.
Well done, Andrew.
For the fans.
But they got quite an interesting. It's quite an interesting little snake. It's something that we didn't realize at all.
No.
Not me, certainly not this morning. About its biology. You know what food it eats.
Yes.
And
apparently they follow the scent trails of ants and termites back to the nest, and then they either swallow the prey whole, but if it's a big termite, for example, what they'll do is just grab the abdomen and suck out the innards, and then spit the thorax and head into the ether. I'm glad I don't have to eat like that. And apparently a really primitive kind of snake.
Yeah.
They've got one eye, and it's on the bottom of the
one
head.
Eye.
Yeah, it doesn't work. It's totally useless. One lung, and a... What else do they say? Oh, there's some West African species that have got vestigial legs. Now, vestigial means a kind of a remnant leg that is not used anymore. So you can see where it used to have a limb, and has a kind of little sticky outy limb. And so they're very primitive. It's a kind of nice way to see the development from lizards to snakes. So very fascinating thing that. The Peter's or distance thread snake. Yeah. Right, let us move on. Brenda, you were worried about disease out here, and you were asking about rabies, and can elephants get rabies, and if so, how and what happens to them? We don't know about elephants specifically, but Steph reckons that all mammals can get rabies.
Based on an article, we're having I wouldn't say an epidemic, but there's definitely an increase in rabies this year. Every year seems to have its own sort of thing that comes about in the dry season. It's been rabies this year. And I've read a lot of articles that have been coming through where I stay. They send out articles as, I suppose, warnings of some sort. And one of them stated that all mammals can get rabies. So I would say, based on that, which was written by quite a prominent vet, Tim Parker, in the area, I would say yes. But I've never seen an elephant with rabies, and up until literally this year, I've never heard of it. But apparently all mammals can get rabies. Things like kudu and impala and bushbuck that would generally be quite afraid of people, their symptoms are coming right up to you, excessive salivating, and being attracted to salt licks, which is where they transfer the disease through their saliva. Things obviously that are more dramatic would be wild dog and leopard. They get super aggressive rather than super docile. But it's something that we do take quite seriously, actually. I know every year it comes about. It has these cycles, but I want to say every couple of years, 5 years or so, we have a...
Well, the last one I know of was probably 6 years ago in this area. And it's born of the fact, I think, largely that, again, the communities of people on the borders of the park here with no veterinary facilities at all. Often their dogs are very important parts of the family, and often used as hunting dogs. And they don't see a vet ever, so they never get inoculated against any kind of disease. And so when rabies comes through, it really does take off, and it's a real danger. And I don't know if you know what happens if a human being gets rabies, but it's really probably one of the most awful ways to go. There's been one recorded case of a human being surviving rabies, and that was somewhere in Middle America. I think it was Chicago or somewhere up there, and she was put on life support, and they managed to, I think they actually froze her down, if I'm not mistaken.
Chilled her right down. Waited for the course of the virus to run through, keeping her core body temperature down, or at least her brain temperature down, and then she pulled her out of it.
But apparently not quite the same. I mean, it does ravage the brain. That's what it does to you. And so not a nice thing for people to get. We get relatively few cases of people getting it here, which is merciful.
Amazing.
And again, so people probably get a bit panicked about the fact that you probably get panicked about the fact that if you come out here and there are rabid leopards knocking about the place and rabid lions, you're likely to be mauled at every occasion. It's not the case. While there is something of an epidemic going on, it doesn't mean that every animal in the park is getting the thing. And certainly it acts so fast on an animal that the chances of you actually seeing and coming into contact with an animal that has it and it then affecting you are so negligible that they're really not anything to worry about.
I think the major stress comes about is once you've been infected, there's no cure for it. So I think that's it's like shark attacks. You know, when you get bitten by a shark, there's no sort of turning back, and it creates this unrealistic fear that you have of this thing. Whereas it's actually been part of the natural environment here for probably thousands of years, and we still have lots of animals. We're still able to live in the bush, and we're still able to interact with these animals on such an intimate level. It's definitely not, something that you need to worry yourself too bad.
No, definitely not. Right, so the rain is actually sort of letting up a bit. I think that's just a brief hiatus before another cloud kind of blows through. And an interesting question, how much rain will it take to fill the Djuma waterhole? Now, I think that comes from Nancy. Nancy, it will take, I think, probably about 6 times what we've had today, right?
Significant runoffs. Yeah.
Really proper runoff, and normally that comes from a storm rather than this very nice soaking stuff that we've had. This is great rain because it doesn't result in any kind of wash-off or erosion. It sinks gently into the ground. The grasses go and start to sprout almost immediately. So I think we're going to need some pretty big storms. I think we're looking at probably end of November before we're going to get the significant runoff that is going to fill these dams up. And Bivelshoek Dam is looking pretty dry quite fast. Cream surgery, yes, very good way of putting it. And then the predators, of course, they don't really like the rain in some ways. You see lions sitting in the rain, and it's not a very pleasant thing for them at all. And Angie and Terry, if you want to know, do they change their strategy for hunting at all? I'm going to say no, I don't think they do. The strategy is the same. They probably would hunt a bit more on a day like this than they would on a bright sunny day. Of course, for the prey, the rain kind of dulls the smell down. It makes it difficult for them to hear what's coming. So they will probably try and they either hang out in the clearings or they go into very thick bush where they can try and hide away from things and stay a bit warmer. But I don't think that the strategy would change at all. It would be the same kind of...
I do see, you sometimes see them pick up their movements, and personally I don't think it's because they're hunting. They'll be opportunistic at anything that comes along. I think it's more to re-establish territorial boundaries that get washed off of leaves and washed off of branches. You see leopard will very often walk up to branches and lift their tail and spurt some urine onto a branch. That gets washed off. And lions would rub their faces into the bushes. So I think in hard rain they won't move around at all, I mean, as we've seen, but definitely after rain like now and between rain bouts they will move around, in particular on territorial boundaries. That's what I would say they do.
An interesting one there, of course, is the lions that we've had recently, and we've had so many different prides in a territory that isn't traditionally theirs. And I think that was quite a coincidence that we had a little bit of rain. The Ngahuma pride has been running away from the Birmingham boys, and after that rain it didn't smell like lion here anymore, and I think that probably contributed to the fact that other prides felt comfortable coming into this area. So that's quite interesting. D, on the subject of rain or lack thereof, you want to know what African animal can go the longest without drinking, and where does it live, etc. D, there are quite a few animals out here that are not dependent on water. I think some of the Namibian antelope, for example, like a dik-dik, probably doesn't ever have to drink. They can probably get all of the water required from the kind of concentrated foods that they find. They have incredibly sophisticated kidneys that are able to extract as much water as possible, and very concentrated urine, so much more efficient than ours, for example.
Steenbok?
What can you? Steenbok also?
Steenbok don't need
the humble Steenbok.
The overlooked Steenbok. Definitely they don't need to drink. the one that we all discount immediately would be the African common donkey. They don't need to drink. So, that's something that we find outside of here. They're one of the most hardy animals that exist here. What else? Most of your predators don't need to drink. Lion don't need to drink. Leopard don't need to drink.
No.
So there's a lot of them actually.
So if you go into an area like Kalahari or into Namibia, where you get some of the same animals that you get here, and the animals here that will drink habitually, same species up there will just not drink.
Yeah.
Leopard's another, it's a really nice one and really interesting one, where leopard will drink here after a kill, and they will drink a lot. But they don't have to. They will get lots of water. Remember, I mean, their prey species are 70% water, and their bodies are designed to extract that. Interestingly, the animal that is most well adapted to the heat of Africa and moving in the heat of the day, if they have sufficient water, is us. We are far more... There is no animal in the world that is adapted to moving the distances that we are in heat. So we don't do it very fast, but if you were to run a marathon, we're the only animal in the world that is able to run those sorts of distances in the kind of conditions that we're able to. So the wildebeest migrate, but they do it. They don't move sort of 80 kilometers in a day. They wouldn't be able to do that, and they certainly can't do it without water and without quite a lot of fuel. We have an amazing ability to get rid of heat, but we do definitely need to drink. There's no human being that can get away with not having something to drink.
Don't we hold the record for being the most adaptable species? We can free dive to 170 meters or whatever it is, so we can withstand 17 times atmospheric pressure on our body. Not a lot of animals can do that. Run, like you say, we're the world's longest distance over a set period of time. What else? We obviously have the biggest brains, most adaptable.
We live in cold and extreme heat.
Cold and extreme heat, so temperature variations. There's nothing else.
I hope tomorrow is going well for you. We hope it goes well for us as well. You want to know about melanism and king cheetah, and do they occur naturally in the area, and where would you maybe be able to find them? As far as I know, king cheetah are naturally occurring. A king cheetah, for those of you who don't know, looks like a normal cheetah, except it's got longitudinal stripes down the back. It's almost like the spots.
I'll take some time while James is explaining.
Kind of the spots have joined up down the back, and it's a magnificent looking animal. And it's a form of melanism, and melanism, for those of you who don't know, is a way of... not a way. Melanism is an increased amount of melanin, which makes for black coloration. So you get melanistic leopard, which would be what many people call a panther. It's a black leopard. You get melanistic jaguars. Not common. It's very uncommon. In the birds, it's probably a bit more common. And there is a king cheetah there. Andrew, I don't know if you can get in on that. Is that a...
Yeah, very good.
And so you can see there, it absolutely looks like a cheetah, but you can see that the spots are very much joined up, especially down the back and round the sides. So that's a king cheetah. And Maggie, they do absolutely occur naturally, and there's no need for them to be specially bred anywhere. And I guess the thing is that people then, once they are found in the wild, often some people will extract them and then try and breed them for, I don't know, exotic animal parks, and of course for the minority of people in the world who would like to go and shoot something exotic like that, which is a great sadness. So melanism is probably less common than we think it is, because a lot of the melanistic animals that we see are bred in captivity, but it's certainly not a common thing at all.
There's rumours that there's melanistic leopard all over the place, and from the outskirts of Pretoria, as far as I know, to all the way into here. But I've never seen one. I've never seen a photograph of one. Obviously, as you get panthers. I've seen pictures of them. The Pretoria Zoo had a black leopard at a time.
That's right.
Yeah, I remember as a kid.
And there's supposed to be one around Lydenburg.
Supposed to be one around Lydenburg, but they've had a project going there for how many years?
Yeah,
a couple of years now, almost a decade or so. Haven't managed to find it just yet. But,
and Gilly in Wisconsin, not Milwaukee at all. have we seen melanistic animals? I have seen a melanistic goshawk. That's the main melanistic animal I've seen. So a bird, melanistic bird. And I mean, melanism in birds I think is more common than it is in mammals. Have you seen a melanistic mammal?
I've seen a melanistic laughing dove, so another bird. And then I saw a photograph out of the South Luangwa National Park of a melanistic genet the other day.
Yeah?
I haven't seen one. Mammal, nothing.
And would you say that something like a pigeon, you know, the common feral pigeon, you know the different colorations, that's melanism and it's leucism, and you get the rufism, I think it's called. So if you ever want to know about these different things, go outside, find a whole lot of pigeons. You'll find them in a park anywhere you like, and those different color variations, you'll find very black ones, you'll find almost plain white ones, and you'll find red ones. And that's exactly what this is. It's melanism, it's leucism, which is the kind of opposite end of melanism, and then you'll get the rufism as well, which is the kind of reddish color. Right, we are going to move on to probably our final question now, and it's, I forget entirely who it comes from. It's to both of us about, it's from Deb. Thank you, Deb. And you want to know what it is that we both, or what is it that we both want to see? Or sorry, there's a lot going on in my ear at the moment. What are the animals that we most want to see, or what are the animals that we've been most surprised by seeing out here? Steph?
I want to see honey badger all the time. I quite enjoy them. They're very active, and they're always doing something, and they always look like they're getting up to mischief. And what have I been most surprised to see out here? Probably a cow. I've seen a cow in the Sabi Sands, just a normal domestic cow, and the story that surrounded this cow was insane. So there was a story of one of the chiefs in Mozambique who wanted to get to Huntington Village, which is a village lying on the opposite end of the Kruger National Park, and decided that he'll strap up his cow and ride it across the Kruger National Park. He made it and then sent his cow home, and we caught the cow on the return leg, trotting down the main road that joins Satara to Nwaneti. And
that would have been surprising.
That was very surprising.
Yes. Okay, so Rebecca in Santa Barbara, you want to know what the most surprising event of our sort of safari lives is? That's pretty good. In terms of animals that I've been most surprised to see, or that I would most like to see out here, I don't know. I think we've seen pretty much the suite of species that can be around here. I'm always fascinated by seeing interesting snakes in this area, and I also, I mean, we see them often, but to see wild dogs is just the most wonderful thing for me. I think, and for me, the most surprising thing when I moved out here, what was the most surprising thing or most enjoyable thing for me being on safari, Rebecca? I think it was my first experience of seeing animals on foot alone. Having that experience of being unarmed, alone, and being that kind of real touch with the wilderness, where it's you and it's the wilderness, and if you make a mistake you're going to get into trouble. And that is apart from being an interesting experience, it was a really kind of touching experience, because it really connected you suddenly. Boom, I felt connected and plugged in suddenly to the wild, and that was the experience that had.
Do you have a bucket list of animals that you'd like to see here?
I don't think I do. Well, I mean, there are lots of animals I'd like to see. I'd love to see tigers in the wild. I'd love to see a king cheetah. I'd love to go and see chimpanzees and gorillas. I think that those would certainly be well on my African bucket list of animals to see.
It's amazing how even after all these years of guiding, we still have so much stuff that we haven't seen, and that's just individual species, not even the behavior of species, which is a lifetime of wanting to see.
And okapi.
And okapi, yes, in the wild. Yes, exactly. No, I don't know. Out here in the Kruger National Park, I'd probably say there's a couple of the mongoose species I haven't seen, like Selous or Meller's mongoose I haven't seen. I haven't seen a water mongoose. I'd like to see one of those. James quite right. A couple of snakes, a few birds I haven't had the pleasure of seeing.
on the water mongoose, we're going to wrap the show up now, of course. In fact, the mist is now blowing into the garage where we're standing. I'm going to tell you a small story about the water mongoose, and I wonder if you haven't heard this before. And I've heard it from Shangaan people, I've heard it from Xhosa people who've never been in contact with each other. The water mongoose, I think down in the Eastern Cape, is known as Mvusi. And Mvusi is known as a chicken killer. And apparently the way that Mvusi catches chickens is to go into the chicken coop at night. And it's a bit of a grim story, this, but I'm going to tell it to you anyway. And what it does is it inverts its bottom so that it looks like a tomato. Sort of sends it, has some kind of a fold of skin inside the bottom, sends it out of the bottom, and it looks like a tomato, and it then faces towards the chickens. The chickens then become really excited by the fact of a midnight snack of tomato, and as they attach themselves or try to peck the tomato, so Mvusi reinverts his bottom and sucks the chicken's head into his bottom and then runs off out of the chicken coop. I have heard this story many times from people who've never seen each other before. It's always my uncle saw it. It's never I've actually seen it. It's always my uncle seen it. But how that story about the water mongoose, which I don't believe to be true, just in case you thought I did, how that has spread throughout southern Africa, I can't imagine. Have you ever heard that before? Yeah, it's wonderful.
Tsokoloshi,
Exactly. Not that.
Stay away from water.
Right, on that rather sort of, disturbing note, we're going to leave you. We will hopefully be on drive this afternoon at 4 o'clock, one of us on foot, or both of us in cars. It depends on what we can fix and what we can't. Thank you for your questions. It's always much easier standing here staring at the camera while we have something to talk about from you, as opposed to just making things up as we go along. So thanks very much for that, and we'll see you a little bit later.
Absolutely.
Bye-bye.